I still remember the night I broke free. My body was shaking, my heart racing so fast I thought it might stop. For 10 long years, I had been trapped in silence, swallowing my pain and pretending everything was fine. But that night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood in front of the man who had made my life a prison, my suitcase in my hand, tears in my eyes, and I whispered, "It's over. I'm leaving." He laughed. He thought I was joking, like all the other times he had broken me down and I stayed. But this time, I had fire in my heart. I was ready to risk everything. My freedom was more important than his threats. My life was worth more than my silence. What happened next still gives me chills. He stepped forward, his face dark with anger, and for a moment I thought, this is it, he's going to finish me tonight. But instead, something inside me snapped. I felt stronger than I ever had in my life. My hands didn't shake anymore. My voice didn't crack. And in that very moment I became free. But freedom doesn't come easy. And what I faced that night was only the beginning of a storm that would change my life forever. Now let me take you back to where it all started, because to understand how I got here you need to hear everything. My name is Margaret, but people call me Maggie. I am 64 years old, speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. And before I continue, please subscribe, like, and click the notification button for more upcoming interesting stories. I also want to know, from which part of the country are you watching this? Let me know in the comments because I love to connect with people everywhere. Alright, let's go back to the beginning. I was just a young bride when I married Thomas. He was tall, handsome, and had a smile that could light up a room. Everyone thought I was the luckiest woman alive. My friends envied me, my family adored him, and for the first few months I believed I had found my happy ending. But it didn't take long for the mask to slip. The first time it happened, it was just words. Harsh, cruel words that cut deeper than any knife. He told me I was worthless, that no man but him would ever want me. I brushed it off, telling myself he was just stressed from work. The second time it was a push. Not too hard, but enough to shake me. I told myself it was an accident, that he didn't mean it. But the third time it was no accident. That was the start of my 10 years of silent suffering. Every day was like walking on broken glass. If I smiled too much, he accused me of flirting. If I stayed quiet, he accused me of plotting. I was trapped in a cage that no one could see because on the outside, he played the role of a perfect husband. Sometimes he would bring me flowers. He'd kiss me in front of people and they would all say, "Maggie, you're so lucky." And I would smile, even though my body was covered in bruises no one could see. But do you know what's worse than pain? Silence. For 10 years, I suffered without saying a word. Not to my family, not to my friends. I told myself that if I stayed quiet, things would get better. That if I prayed enough, if I loved him enough, maybe he would change. But he never did. The years rolled by, and my soul grew heavier. I would sit by the window at night, watching the stars, wondering if life would ever give me a way out. One night, I held my daughter Emma in my arms. She was only 8 years old at the time. She looked up at me with her big blue eyes and asked, "Mommy, why are you always sad?" That question broke me in ways I can't explain. Children see more than we think. And in that moment, I realized, I wasn't just destroying myself by staying. I was teaching my daughter that suffering in silence was normal. I knew something had to change. But leaving wasn't easy. Every time I tried to gather the courage, Thomas would remind me of his power. "You have nothing without me," he said. "No money, no home. If you leave, you'll have nothing but the clothes on your back." And he was right. At least, that's what I believed. So I stayed. Until one night, everything exploded. We were in the kitchen. He was angry because dinner was late. His voice was louder than ever, his face red with rage. Emma was hiding in the corner, crying. And then he picked up a glass and smashed it against the wall, right beside my head. Shards flew everywhere. My ears rang. My heart raced. Emma screamed. That was the night I made my choice. I wouldn't stay another day. I wouldn't let my daughter grow up thinking this was what love looked like. So I began to plan. Quietly, secretly. Each day, I saved a little money from grocery shopping. Each night, I whispered prayers into the darkness, asking God for strength. And each morning I promised myself soon I will be free. What I didn't know was that my decision would lead to the most dangerous moment of my life. Because the night I finally decided to leave, Thomas found out. The night Thomas found out I was planning to leave is burned into my memory like a scar. I had hidden a small bag under the bed, filled with clothes for Emma and me. Inside my purse, I had tucked away the little bit of money I had saved over months. My heart was both heavy and hopeful, because tomorrow morning before the sun rose, I was going to take Emma's hand and walk out of that house forever. But Thomas was smarter than I thought. He always had a way of sniffing out secrets. That night, I was lying in bed, pretending to be asleep, when I felt his hand reach under the mattress. My body froze. He pulled out the bag. "Maggie." His voice was low, dangerous. "What's this?" I sat up quickly, my throat dry. My words stumbled out. It's nothing. Just clothes." "Don't lie to me," he roared, throwing the bag across the room. Emma woke up from her little bed in the corner, startled, and began to cry. Thomas turned to me with eyes darker than I had ever seen. "You thought you could leave me? Huh? You think you can survive without me? You'll come crawling back in a week." For a moment, I felt the old fear, the chains of silence tightening around me. But then I looked at Emma, her small body shaking, her tears streaming down her face, and something inside me hardened. I whispered, "I'm not crawling back. Not ever." That one sentence lit the fire. Thomas lunged at me, grabbing my wrist so tightly I thought my bones would snap. I cried out in pain, but instead of begging, I glared at him. That shocked him. He wasn't used to seeing me fight back. He dragged me into the kitchen, his voice filled with fury. "If you walk out that door, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." He slammed me against the wall, his face inches from mine. "I'd rather see you dead than watch you leave me." Emma was screaming now, pulling on his arm, begging him to stop. My heart raced so fast I thought it might burst. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. He meant every word. He was truly ready to end me. I struggled to breathe, my eyes darting around the kitchen. That's when I saw it, the phone, sitting on the counter just a few feet away. If I could get to it, maybe I could call for help. But Thomas was stronger, angrier, and he had no intention of letting me go. The fight of my life had begun. But before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back a little. Because this wasn't the first time Thomas had tried to make me feel like leaving him would mean death. I remember a night, years before, when I had packed my things after one of his worst outbursts. Emma had been only 4 years old, and I couldn't stop shaking. Thomas blocked the door, holding a knife in his hand, not pointing it at me, just holding it, like a warning. "Where are you going, Maggie?" he asked calmly, almost too calmly. "You belong here. Don't you ever forget that." That night, I unpacked my bags, my heart pounding with terror. I told myself I couldn't risk my daughter's life. But deep inside, I knew. I had made a mistake by giving in to fear. That mistake chained me for 6 more years. Now, standing in the kitchen years later, with Thomas's hand crushing my wrist and his threats ringing in my ears, I realized this was the moment I should have chosen long ago. This was my chance to fight back. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage I had. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You don't owe me anymore, Thomas." And then, something shocking happened that changed everything. Emma, my little girl, did something I never expected. Emma was only 8 years old, but in that terrifying moment, she showed more courage than I had in 10 years of silent suffering. As Thomas held me against the wall, his grip crushing my wrist, Emma ran across the kitchen. My heart skipped a beat. I thought she was running away to hide, but no. She grabbed the cast iron skillet from the stove with both hands. "Leave my mommy alone," she screamed with all the strength her little voice could carry. Before Thomas could react, Emma swung the skillet as hard as she could. It hit his arm with a loud clang. He howled in pain and loosened his grip on me just enough for me to break free. I grabbed Emma and pulled her behind me, shielding her with my body. My chest rose and fell in panic, my heart racing. For the first time, Thomas looked at Emma not as his little girl but as an enemy. And that terrified me more than anything. "You ungrateful brat," he shouted, clutching his arm. His face twisted with fury. "You're just like your mother. Trying to destroy me." Emma clung to me, sobbing. "Mommy, let's run. Please, let's go." In that moment, I realized something powerful. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom anymore. I was fighting for my daughter's future. If I stayed, Emma would grow up in the same cycle of fear and pain. If I left, at least she had a chance at a better life. Thomas staggered toward us, his rage boiling over. I looked at the phone again on the counter. My only chance. I shoved Emma toward the back door and whispered, "Run, baby. Run to the neighbor's house and don't look back." But Emma shook her head, refusing to leave me. Her little hands clung tightly to my dress. Thomas was only a few feet away now. His eyes were wild, his breath heavy. And then he reached for the knife block on the counter. My blood ran cold. He pulled out the biggest knife, pointing it toward us. "If I can't keep you," he said through gritted teeth, "then no one will have you." Emma screamed. My body trembled. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find. A broken piece of glass from when he had smashed the cup earlier. My hand bled as I picked it up, but I didn't care. I was ready to fight. This was no longer about surviving another night. This was about life or death. But then, just as Thomas took his first step toward us, something unexpected happened. There was a loud knock at the front door. Thomas froze. His grip tightened on the knife, his eyes darting toward the sound. My breath caught in my throat. Who could it be at this hour? The knocking grew louder. "Maggie? Maggie, are you in there?" It was Mrs. Peterson, my elderly neighbor. She was the kind of woman who always noticed everything. She had probably heard the shouting, maybe even the crash of the glass. Thomas's face twisted with panic and fury. He turned back to me, his knife trembling in his hand. I could see the war in his eyes. Should he silence me once and for all? Or should he pretend everything was fine? And that's when I realized, this knock could either save my life, or end it. The sound of Mrs. Peterson's voice at the front door was like a sudden crack of thunder in the middle of a storm. "Maggie? Are you all right in there?" she called again, her knock louder this time. Thomas's whole body tensed. He glared at me, his jaw clenched, the knife still raised in his hand. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to do it, end me right there in front of my daughter, even with the neighbor at the door. But then his eyes darted toward the hallway. He was thinking, calculating. That was how Thomas worked. He always played two faces. To the world, he was charming, polite, the perfect husband. To me, he was a monster. If Mrs. Peterson saw him like this, with a knife in his hand and me trembling with blood dripping from my palm, his mask would shatter. So he made his choice. With a sharp growl, he dropped the knife back on the counter and grabbed me by the arm, his nails digging into my skin. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Don't you dare say a word. Smile. If you tell her anything, I swear you'll regret it." He let go, straightened his shirt, and walked calmly to the front door as though nothing had happened. I quickly wiped my tears with the back of my hand and pulled Emma close, whispering to her, "Stay behind me. Don't speak." Thomas opened the door. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice full of fake cheer. "What a surprise at this hour." The old woman peered inside, her eyes sharp as ever. She wasn't fooled easily. I heard shouting, "Thomas!" And a crash. "Is everything all right?" Thomas chuckled softly. "Oh, that." Maggie dropped a glass while doing the dishes. "You know how clumsy she can be." He tilted his head toward me with a smile that made my stomach twist. "Right, honey?" For a split second, the world stood still. I felt Mrs. Peterson's eyes on me, studying me. Emma's small fingers squeezed mine tightly, as if begging me to speak the truth. This was my chance. If I told Mrs. Peterson everything, if I let the words pour out, maybe, just maybe, she could help us escape tonight. But Thomas's eyes were on me too, burning with silent threats. If I said one wrong word, he would make me pay. I forced a smile, though it felt like knives in my chest. "Yes." I dropped a glass. "Everything's fine." Mrs. Peterson narrowed her eyes. She didn't look convinced. Her gaze drifted down to my hand, the one bleeding from the shard of glass I had picked up earlier. I quickly tried to hide it behind my dress, but it was too late. She had seen. "Are you sure, Maggie?" she asked softly. Her voice carried more weight than the question itself. It was like she was asking, "Do you need me to save you?" My lips trembled. My throat burned. I wanted to scream. No, I'm not fine. Help me. But the fear was stronger. Thomas stepped in, blocking her view of me. We're fine really. Thank you for checking. But Maggie and Emma are about to go to bed. It's been a long day. Mrs. Peterson's eyes flickered one last time toward me before she slowly nodded. All right, but remember, Maggie, my door is always open. She turned and walked away into the night. As soon as the door closed, Thomas locked it with a sharp click. His smile vanished instantly. He turned back to me, his face twisted in rage. You see what you almost did? He hissed. You almost ruined everything. You think anyone will believe you over me? Don't even dream of it. He grabbed the broken bag he had thrown earlier and hurled it at me again. Clothes scattered across the floor. You're not leaving me, Maggie, he growled. Not now, not ever. My hands shook. Emma clung to me, sobbing quietly. My heart sank. I had missed my chance. But deep inside, a tiny spark refused to die. Mrs. Peterson had seen the blood. She had seen the fear in my eyes. She knew something was wrong. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't let it go. I didn't know it then, but that tiny spark, the neighbor's suspicion, was about to light a fire that would change everything. And it all began the very next morning, when Thomas made a decision that nearly destroyed us. The morning sun should have felt warm and comforting, but in our house, it only exposed the cracks in my soul. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the knife in Thomas's hand, Emma's terrified face, and Mrs. Peterson's eyes watching me at the door. Thomas was already awake, pacing the kitchen like a lion guarding its prey. His mood was unreadable, but that was what made him so dangerous. When I entered with Emma, clutching her hand tightly, he stopped pacing and stared at us. For a long, heavy moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then he said something that froze me to my core. Pack your things. Both of you. We're leaving. I blinked in shock. Leaving? Where? He smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a husband. It was the smile of a predator. Somewhere no one will find us. If you think you can run, if you think you can whisper to neighbors or friends, you're wrong. From now on, Maggie, you belong to me and only me. Emma squeezed my hand tighter. Her lips quivered. Daddy, I don't want to go, she whispered. His head snapped toward her, his eyes blazing. Don't you dare talk back to me. I quickly pulled her close, shielding her from his glare. My voice trembled. Thomas, please. She's just a child. He slammed his fist on the table so hard that Emma screamed. I said pack. The sound echoed through the kitchen, shaking the walls and my heart. I realized in horror what he was planning. He wanted to take us away, to isolate us completely. If he managed to move us somewhere far from neighbors, far from anyone who could see or hear us, then Emma and I would disappear into silence forever. This was no longer just about abuse. This was about control. Complete, terrifying control. My mind raced. I couldn't let this happen. If he dragged us away, no one would ever know the truth. No one would ever hear my cries. Mrs. Peterson would only think back to last night and wonder. But by then, we would be gone. I forced myself to speak calmly, even though my insides were shaking. All right, Thomas. I'll pack. He narrowed his eyes at me, as though searching for any sign of rebellion. Then he nodded slowly. Good. You're finally learning. I took Emma's hand and walked her to our bedroom. As soon as the door shut, I knelt in front of her and whispered, Listen to me carefully, sweetheart. Whatever happens, you must stay strong. We're not going to let him take us away. Do you understand? Emma wiped her tears and nodded, though her little body trembled. I knew what I had to do. If there was ever a time to act, it was now. But how? Then I remembered something. Years ago, before Thomas started controlling everything, I had hidden a spare key to the back door under the floorboard of our closet. He never knew about it. That key was the only thing standing between us and escape. I pressed my finger to my lips, telling Emma to stay quiet, and carefully lifted the loose board. My heart leapt when I saw the rusty old key still tucked inside. I wrapped it in a handkerchief and slipped it into my pocket. But just as I was about to close the board back, the bedroom door creaked open. Thomas was standing there, his shadow long and dark across the floor. What are you doing? He asked slowly. My blood ran cold. The key burned in my pocket like a secret waiting to explode. I forced a smile, even as my pulse hammered in my throat. Just folding Emma's clothes. He studied me for a moment that felt like a lifetime. Then he stepped inside, his hand brushing over the dresser, his eyes sharp and searching. "You better not be thinking of anything stupid," he said finally. "Because if you are, Maggie, I'll make sure you never get the chance again." I nodded quickly, hiding the terror in my chest. He walked out, slamming the door behind him. Emma looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. "Mommy, he knows." I hugged her tightly. "Then we have to move faster." That night, when the house went dark and Thomas finally slept, Emma and I would use that key. It was our one chance at freedom. But what I didn't know was that Thomas wasn't really asleep. He was waiting, watching. And the moment we tried to run, the nightmare truly began. The house was silent that night, but it was not a safe silence. It was the kind that made the air feel heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I lay in bed beside Emma, pretending to sleep, my body stiff with fear. Across the hallway, Thomas's door was shut. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing, deep and steady, like he was asleep. But I knew him too well. That man could fake anything: sleep, kindness, even love. Still, I had no choice. Tonight had to be the night. Slowly, I turned to Emma and whispered, "Are you ready, baby?" She nodded, clutching her little backpack tightly. Her eyes were wide, filled with both fear and hope. Quietly, I slid out of bed. My hand trembled as I pulled the key from my pocket. It felt heavier than before, as if it carried not just metal but the weight of our entire future. Step by step, we crept across the floor. The old wood creaked under our feet, and each sound made my heart jump. I held Emma's hand tightly, leading her toward the back door. My fingers fumbled as I fit the key into the lock. Click. The sound was deafening in the quiet house. I turned it slowly. The lock gave way. For the first time in 10 years, freedom was just inches away. I pushed the door open, the cool night air brushing against my face. It smelled like rain and hope. I almost cried from relief. But then, a voice cut through the darkness like a knife. "Where do you think you're going?" I froze. My blood turned to ice. Emma gasped. I turned slowly. Thomas was standing in the hallway, his figure half hidden in shadow. He was wide awake, his eyes blazing with fury. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might burst. He stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can outsmart me, Maggie? You think you can just walk out?" I pulled Emma behind me, shielding her with my body. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "We're leaving, Thomas. You can't stop us." He laughed, a dark, chilling laugh. "Can't stop you? Maggie, you've been mine for 10 years. You think one rusty little key is enough to break that?" Emma clung to my dress, sobbing quietly. My hands trembled, but I held my ground. For the first time, I wasn't just a scared wife. I was a mother fighting for her child. Thomas's face twisted with rage. He lunged forward, slamming the door shut before I could pull it open fully. The bang echoed through the house. "No one leaves me," he growled, his hand gripping the doorknob so hard his knuckles turned white. "No one." He shoved me back, and I stumbled into the wall, my head striking hard against it. My vision blurred for a moment. Emma screamed, trying to run to me, but Thomas grabbed her arm. "Let her go," I shouted, pushing myself back to my feet. His grip tightened around Emma's arm. "If you want to leave, fine. But she stays." My heart stopped. His words cut through me like fire. Leave without Emma? Never. Rage unlike anything I had ever felt before surged inside me. For 10 years, I had lived in fear. But in that moment, fear vanished. Love replaced it. A mother's love. A mother's fury. I charged at him, clawing at his arms, hitting him with every ounce of strength I had left. He stumbled back, shocked by my sudden fight. Emma broke free and ran to me, clinging to my side. We backed away toward the door again. My hand reached for the knob. I twisted it hard. The door flew open once more. Freedom. It was right there. Just one step away. But Thomas roared and lunged again. This time he grabbed something from the table. The knife he had left earlier. His face was wild, his hand shaking, the blade glinting in the dim light. "You're not leaving me alive, Maggie," he screamed, Emma shrieked in terror. My body went cold. This was it, the moment where everything would either end or begin. And then, there was another sound. A crash of glass breaking from outside. All three of us turned toward the noise. Someone was at the window, and that someone was about to change everything. The crash of glass splitting through the silence sent shockwaves across the room. Thomas spun around, knife in hand, his face twisted with rage and confusion. "Who's there?" he roared, his voice shaking the walls. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. Emma clung to my waist, trembling like a leaf. And then, out of the shattered window, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness. A voice called out, steady, commanding, and nothing like Thomas's. "Police! Step away from her." I froze. My mind struggled to catch up. Police? How did they know? Two officers climbed in through the broken window, their guns drawn. One of them shouted again, "Drop the knife." Now, Thomas's whole body stiffened. His hand trembled on the knife handle. His eyes darted between the officers, me and Emma. His mask of control was slipping fast. "Put it down, sir," the officer barked. For a moment, I thought Thomas might obey. His arm lowered slightly, the blade glinting in the dim light. But then his rage exploded. He spun toward me, eyes burning like fire. "This is your fault, Maggie. You brought them here." He raised the knife. My scream tore through the room. But before the blade could come down, one of the officers lunged forward, tackling Thomas to the ground. The knife clattered across the floor, spinning beneath the table. Emma buried her face in my stomach, sobbing uncontrollably. I held her close, tears flooding my own eyes as I watched the struggle. Thomas fought like a wild animal, shouting curses, his face red with fury. It took both officers to pin him down. One of them wrestled his arms behind his back, while the other snapped the cuffs onto his wrists. "You can't do this." Thomas spat, his voice hoarse with rage. "She's my wife. She belongs to me." Those words sent chills down my spine, but for the first time in 10 years, I realized they no longer had power over me. The officer glared down at him. "She doesn't belong to you. And you're done hurting her." The sound of those cuffs locking shut felt like chains breaking in my heart. Emma lifted her head and whispered through tears, "Mommy, are we free?" I kissed the top of her head, holding her tighter than ever. "Yes, baby. We're free." But deep inside, I knew it wasn't over yet. Because even with Thomas on the ground, his threats still echoed in my ears. He wasn't the kind of man to let go easily. As the officers dragged him toward the door, he turned his head and looked straight at me. His eyes were wild, his voice low and venomous. "This isn't the end, Maggie. You'll never be free from me. Never." The words pierced through me like ice. And just like that, I knew my fight wasn't over. Thomas would find a way to come back. But what I didn't know was that his revenge would arrive sooner than I expected. And in a way I could never have imagined. The night Thomas was taken away should have felt like victory. For the first time in 10 years, Emma and I slept without the sound of his footsteps pacing the hallway, without the fear of his hand on the doorknob, without the weight of his shadow hanging over us. But freedom doesn't come clean. It comes with scars, with whispers, with fear that still clings like smoke long after the fire is gone. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the broken window. Emma was curled beside me, her little face peaceful for the first time in months. I stroked her hair gently and whispered, "We're safe now, baby." But in the back of my mind, Thomas's last words echoed like thunder. "You'll never be free from me. Never." The police had stayed until almost dawn, taking my statement, photographing the bruises on my arms, and collecting the knife as evidence. Mrs. Peterson stood outside the whole time, her arms folded, her eyes heavy with worry. When the officers finally left with Thomas, she came over and hugged me tightly. "I knew something wasn't right," she whispered. "I should have come sooner." Tears welled in my eyes. "You saved us, Mrs. Peterson. If you hadn't called them..." My voice cracked. I couldn't even finish. She patted my cheek. "Don't you worry now. You're stronger than you think, Maggie. You and that little girl are going to be just fine." Her words comforted me, but my heart still raced with doubt. Thomas wasn't the type of man to let go. I knew it in my bones. That afternoon the phone rang. I almost jumped out of my skin. My hand shook as I picked it up, half expecting to hear his voice. But it was Officer Daniels, the man who had tackled Thomas the night before. "Mrs. Walker," he said firmly, "we've got your husband in custody. There'll be a restraining order in place, and we'll keep you updated. But I need to be honest, men like him don't give up easily. You and your daughter should stay with someone you trust for now. Don't stay in that house alone." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I understand." That night Emma and I packed our things, this time for real. Mrs. Peterson offered us her spare bedroom. It was small with floral wallpaper and a creaky bed, but it felt like a castle compared to the prison we had lived in for a decade. For a few weeks, life felt almost normal. Emma laughed again, playing in Mrs. Peterson's garden. I found myself smiling, breathing easier, tasting a bit of what freedom really felt like. But then, just when I started to believe we were safe, the first letter came. It was slipped under Mrs. Peterson's front door late at night. There was no envelope, just a piece of paper, the words scrawled in Thomas's angry handwriting. "You can hide behind the police, but I'll find you. You'll always be mine." My hand shook so badly the paper nearly slipped from my fingers. I wanted to tear it up, to throw it away, but I couldn't. I had to show the police. The next morning, Officer Daniels came back to the house. He read the letter, his jaw tightening. "We'll look into this," he promised. "But you need to stay strong, Mrs. Walker. Don't let him scare you back into silence." I nodded, though my insides churned with dread. That night, I locked every window, every door. Emma slept soundly, but I lay awake, listening to every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind. And just when I thought I was finally drifting off, I heard it. A sound outside the window. A slow, deliberate tap against the glass. My blood froze. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat. I moved toward the window, every step trembling. And there, through the thin curtain, I saw the shadow of a man standing outside. My heart nearly stopped. He was back. The tapping on the glass froze me in place. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure it would wake Emma. I clutched the curtain with trembling fingers, praying it was nothing more than a branch swaying in the wind. But then another tap. Slow. Intentional. I pulled the curtain aside just an inch, and my blood ran cold. There he was. Thomas. His face pressed against the window pane, eyes wide and unblinking, lips curled into a smile that sent shivers down my spine. I gasped and stumbled backward, my hand covering my mouth to keep from screaming. Emma stirred in her sleep. I couldn't let her wake up and see him like that. I darted for the phone on the nightstand and dialed 911 with shaking hands. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. It's him, it's Thomas. I whispered frantically. He's outside the window. Please send someone, please. Stay calm, ma'am. Officers are on their way. Don't open the door, don't approach him. Stay inside. But even as she spoke, Thomas's hand pressed against the glass, his breath fogging it. He mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I could read his lips. You can't hide. Fear clawed at my throat. I rushed to lock the bedroom door and pulled Emma into my arms, rocking her gently as she stirred. Minutes felt like hours. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the house felt like a threat. I was sure Thomas would smash the window and come tearing inside. And then the sound of sirens in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed through the curtains. When I looked back at the window, he was gone. The officers searched the yard with flashlights, but he had vanished into the night like a ghost. Mrs. Peterson, pale and shaken, wrung her hands as she spoke to them. I knew this would happen. That man, he's not going to stop. Officer Daniels found the letter I had hidden away. He held it up. This proves he's violating his restraining order. We'll keep pressing charges. But even as he spoke, doubt filled my chest. Thomas had slipped away before. And the way he stared through that glass, smiling at me like a predator with prey, he wasn't finished. That night, I sat by Emma's bed until dawn, unable to close my eyes. My mind raced with one thought. If the police couldn't stop him, how would I protect my daughter? Days turned into weeks. We stayed locked inside Mrs. Peterson's home, curtains drawn, lights low. Emma grew restless, missing school and friends. I tried to keep her busy with board games and stories, but the fear hung in the air like poison. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse. One morning I opened the front door to fetch the newspaper. And there it was. A small box sitting neatly on the porch. No address. No note. Just my name written in that same angry scrawl, Maggie. My stomach dropped. I bent down, heart pounding, and slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a single object. A knife. The same kind Thomas had held to my throat the night of his arrest. And beneath it, a piece of paper with 4 chilling words. See you very soon. I staggered back, the box slipping from my hands. I stared at the knife in the box, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped it again. The steel glinted in the morning sun, sharp and menacing, like a promise carved in silence. Emma clutched my arm. Mommy, what does it mean? I forced a smile I didn't feel, my voice shaking. It means we need to be very careful, sweetheart. Very, very careful. But inside, panic was clawing at me. Thomas wasn't just threatening anymore. He was hunting. Mrs. Peterson hurried to call the police. Officer Daniels arrived within minutes, his expression hard as stone when he saw the box. This is escalating, he muttered. He's taunting you, trying to scare you into breaking. But we won't let that happen. He bagged the knife and the note as evidence. But when I begged him to keep an officer stationed outside the house, he sighed. We're stretched thin, Mrs. Walker. I'll do my best, but I can't make promises. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream. How could they leave us vulnerable, knowing Thomas was out there, circling like a wolf? That night, I barely slept. Every sound, every creak of the house, every gust of wind rattling the shutters, felt like Thomas creeping closer. I kept Emma in bed with me, holding her so tightly she complained I was squeezing her too hard. But I couldn't let go. Not now. 2 nights later, it happened again. A noise outside. Not tapping this time. Something heavier. I crept toward the window, my heart racing. I pulled the curtain aside and gasped. The box was back. But this time when I opened it, my blood ran cold. Inside wasn't a knife. It was one of Emma's dolls. Broken. The head had been ripped off. And in its place, a note was pinned with a rusty nail. Next time it won't be the doll. My scream tore through the house before I could stop it. Emma woke up, her sleepy eyes widening in terror when she saw her doll in pieces. She clutched me, crying, Mommy, he's going to hurt us. Mrs. Peterson ran in, her face pale as chalk. This is too much, Maggie. You can't stay here. He knows where you are. He's getting closer. She was right. I realized then that hiding wouldn't save us. If Thomas could slip past police patrols, if he could leave boxes on the porch without being caught, then he could get to us whenever he wanted. And if I didn't act soon, he would. That night, as Emma slept, I sat at Mrs. Peterson's kitchen table with my head in my hands. Fear had ruled my life for 10 years. Thomas had stolen my voice, my peace, my freedom. But as I stared at the broken doll, something inside me hardened. I wasn't just a victim. I was a mother. And mothers don't just run. They fight. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of strength burn through my fear. I whispered to myself, no more hiding. If Thomas wants a war, he's going to get one. But before I could even decide what my first move would be, there was a sudden, thunderous bang at the back door. The sound made the walls rattle. Emma screamed. Mrs. Peterson dropped her teacup, the porcelain shattering on the floor. And from the other side of the door came a voice I knew too well. Thomas. Maggie, he bellowed, his fists slamming against the wood. You think you can hide from me? You think the police can protect you? Open this door. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a warning anymore. This was an attack. The pounding on the back door grew louder, each slam shaking the frame. Thomas's voice thundered through the night like a nightmare made real. Maggie, you can't run from me forever. Open this door before I break it down. Emma screamed and clung to me, her tiny body trembling. Mrs. Peterson, pale and shaking, whispered, Call the police. Hurry. I grabbed the phone with slippery, trembling hands and dialed 911 again. 911, what's your emergency? It's Thomas. He's here. He's trying to break into the house. I cried. Stay calm, ma'am. Officers are on their way. Stay somewhere safe. Don't confront him. But as the operator spoke, the back door creaked. The wood was splintering. He was close to breaking through. Mrs. Peterson pulled Emma toward the hallway. "Come on, Maggie. We have to hide." I followed them, my heart slamming against my ribs. We rushed into the pantry closet, a small cramped space with shelves of canned goods, and pulled the door shut. Inside the darkness, I held Emma tight against me, my hand pressed over her mouth to muffle her whimpers. We listened. The sound of wood cracking echoed through the house. Then footsteps. Heavy, slow, purposeful. He was inside. Tears stung my eyes as I thought about the promise I had made to myself. I had sworn I would fight for my daughter, not cower in the dark like prey. But right now, with Thomas just feet away, my courage felt like it was slipping. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I held my breath, every nerve in my body screaming. Then his voice. Soft, mocking, chilling. "Maggie. I know you're in here. You can't hide from me. Not anymore." Emma's tiny hands clutched my shirt. Her silent sobs broke my heart. Mrs. Peterson squeezed my arm, whispering, "Don't move. Don't breathe." But then, Thomas's shadow appeared under the crack of the pantry door. He was right there. His hand rattled the knob. Slowly, deliberately. I thought my heart would burst out of my chest. Then sirens. The wail cut through the night like a blade. Thomas cursed under his breath. Footsteps thundered away from the pantry. Then the slam of the back door. Police voices shouted outside. Flashlights blazed through the windows. I collapsed against the shelves, gasping for air I didn't realize I had been holding. Emma clung to me, her face buried in my chest. When we finally stepped out of the pantry, 2 officers were inside, guns drawn. But Thomas was gone. Again. Officer Daniels looked furious. We were so close. He's playing a dangerous game. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand why this man kept slipping through their fingers. But all I could do was hold Emma tighter and whisper over and over, "You're safe. Mommy's here. You're safe." But deep down I knew the truth. Thomas wasn't going to stop until one of 2 things happened. Either he got me, or I stopped him first. And that night, as I rocked Emma to sleep, a dangerous thought crept into my mind. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for Thomas to strike. Maybe it was time I struck first. The house still smelled of splintered wood, and fear the next morning. The broken door had been patched with police tape, and Mrs. Peterson's kitchen felt more like a crime scene than a safe haven. Emma wouldn't let go of my hand, even when she tried to eat her cereal. Every sound made her flinch. I hated it. I hated what Thomas was doing to us. Officer Daniels returned that morning, looking more tired than ever. He set his hat on the table and sighed. "He's escalating fast," he said. "That break-in was bold, reckless. He's desperate. But he's also smart. He knows how to slip away before we corner him." I clenched my fists. And how long before he stops slipping away and finally finishes what he started? Daniels looked at me, his eyes heavy. "That's what we're trying to prevent." But trying wasn't enough. I had been trying to survive Thomas for 10 years. And all it gave me was scars, nightmares, and a daughter who now jumped at shadows. That afternoon, after the officers left, Mrs. Peterson sat across from me with folded arms. "Maggie, you can't keep waiting for them to save you. You need a plan. A real plan." Her words cut deep because they echoed the same thought that had been circling in my mind since last night in the pantry. I was tired of hiding. I was tired of waiting. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just scared. I was angry. I looked at Mrs. Peterson, my voice low and firm. "You're right. I can't just sit here anymore. If Thomas wants to hunt me, then I'm going to be ready for him." She blinked. "Ready? Maggie, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I whispered, "that I'm going to stop being prey." For the first time in a decade, the fire inside me burned hotter than my fear. I began thinking of everything Thomas had taught me, not with words but with pain, his patterns, his weaknesses, the way his anger clouded his judgment. He was dangerous, but he wasn't invincible. I started small. I walked through the house, imagining how I would protect Emma if he got in again. I marked hiding spots. I checked locks. I even took a heavy iron skillet from the kitchen and kept it by the door of the room where we slept. But deep inside, I knew defense wasn't enough. If I wanted to end this, I had to go further. I had to set a trap. That night, when Emma was asleep and Mrs. Peterson was dozing in her chair, I sat alone at the table with the broken doll Thomas had left behind. I stared at its empty eyes and whispered, "You think you're the hunter, Thomas. But you've forgotten one thing." I placed the doll down and clenched my fists. "You taught me how to survive you. Now I'm going to use that to destroy you." My plan wasn't fully formed yet, but the seed was planted. And that seed would grow into the one thing Thomas never expected from me: a fight. But just as I began sketching out ideas, a sudden knock at the front door made me freeze. It wasn't loud like Thomas's pounding. It was soft. Too soft. Mrs. Peterson stirred awake, frowning. Who could that be at this hour? My stomach dropped. I moved slowly toward the door, my hand tightening around the skillet. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. Then a low, chilling whisper seeped through the crack. "Maggie." It was Thomas. He wasn't kicking or slamming this time. He was waiting. The whisper was like ice sliding down my spine. "Maggie." I froze, skillet tight in my grip, heart hammering so loud I thought Thomas could hear it through the door. Mrs. Peterson gasped softly and shook her head, mouthing, "Don't answer. Don't move." Emma stirred in her sleep, whimpering, her little voice muffled from the back room. My pulse raced faster. If she woke up and cried, Thomas would know exactly where we were. I pressed my back to the door, holding my breath, listening. The silence stretched on. Then another whisper, slower, sharper, almost like a hiss. "You think the police can save you? They won't. Not this time." Mrs. Peterson gripped my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. He tapped the door gently. Once. Twice. Like a predator testing the cage around its prey. "Open up, Maggie. Don't make me come in again." Every muscle in my body screamed to fight. I wanted to fling the door open and smash the skillet across his skull. But fear chained me still. Then I remembered my plan. The seed I had planted. I couldn't fight recklessly. I had to outsmart him. So I forced myself to stay calm. I pressed my lips close to the wood and whispered, steady but sharp, "You'll never hurt me again." There was silence on the other side. No breath. No footsteps. Just silence. I leaned back, skillet raised, waiting. Then laughter. Low. Twisted. Mocking. It grew louder until it echoed through the night, bouncing off the quiet street outside. My stomach churned as Emma cried out from the back room, frightened by the noise. Thomas stopped laughing abruptly. "You can't hide her from me forever," he growled. "She's mine too, Maggie. And one way or another, I'll take her." My blood turned cold. Footsteps retreated from the porch. A car engine roared to life in the distance. Tires screeched, fading into the night. He was gone. For now. I dropped the skillet to the floor with a loud clang, my knees buckling beneath me. Mrs. Peterson helped me into a chair, but her face was pale as chalk. "He's not going to stop," she whispered. "No," I said, shaking, my eyes burning with fury. "But neither am I." And in that moment, I knew something had shifted inside me. Thomas had just revealed his weakness. He wasn't after me anymore. Not just me. He was after Emma. And that was his biggest mistake. Because now, I wasn't just fighting to survive. I was fighting as a mother. And a mother's wrath is something even a monster like Thomas could never escape. But the question was, how far was I willing to go to end this nightmare? Sleep was impossible that night. Every creak of the old house sounded like Thomas creeping back. Every gust of wind felt like his hand reaching for Emma. I sat at the edge of the bed, watching her chest rise and fall as she slept. My little girl. Innocent, fragile, terrified. He wanted her. He wanted to drag her into the same pit of torment he had kept me in for 10 years. I swore then and there, I would never let that happen. The next morning, while Emma played quietly with her crayons, I pulled Mrs. Peterson aside. My voice was firm, no longer trembling. "I can't keep waiting for him to strike again. I have to strike first." Her brows shot up. "Strike? Maggie, you're talking like," she lowered her voice, "like you're planning to fight him." "I'm not just planning it. I'm going to do it." She grabbed my hands, her voice urgent. Maggie, you've been through too much. You're still healing. Let the police handle him. I shook my head. The police have rules. Thomas doesn't. The only rule he knows is fear, and I've played by his rules for too long. Mrs. Peterson looked at me, torn between fear and admiration. Finally, she whispered, "If you're serious, then you'll need help." She wasn't wrong. So for the first time in 10 years, I swallowed my pride and reached out. I called someone I hadn't spoken to since before my marriage. A friend from high school named Sarah. Back then, she was fiery, fearless, the kind of girl who never backed down from anything. When she picked up the phone, her voice cracked with shock. "Maggie? After all these years?" The words came pouring out of me. About Thomas, the years of abuse, the threats, the break-ins. About Emma. About how tired I was of being hunted. Sarah didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over. Today." When she arrived, she hugged me so tightly I almost collapsed in her arms. "You should have called me years ago," she said. We sat at the table, and together, the three of us, me, Sarah, and Mrs. Peterson, began sketching out a plan. We listed Thomas's habits, his rage, his impatience, his need to control, the way he always underestimated me. "He's cocky," Sarah said, tapping the table. "That's his weakness. He thinks he owns you. He won't expect you to fight back." "Exactly," I said. "Which is why I'm going to make him think he's won. And when he walks into the trap..." I didn't finish the sentence, but the fire in my eyes told them everything. Sarah leaned back and smiled grimly. "I like this side of you, Maggie. About time you stopped running." But even as the fire grew in me, a flicker of fear still lingered. Because planning to fight Thomas was one thing. Facing him was another. That night, after Emma drifted off, I stood at the window and stared into the dark street. Somewhere out there, he was watching. Waiting. I whispered to the night, my voice steady, my heart pounding with new resolve. "You're not the only hunter anymore, Thomas." But just as those words left my lips, a noise cut through the silence, a crunch of gravel. Someone was outside. I froze, my body tense, as the sound grew closer. And then, a shadow moved across the yard, heading straight for the house. The sound of gravel crunching outside made every hair on my neck stand on end. I pressed Emma closer to my chest, my heartbeat thundering as I crept toward the window. The shadow stretched long under the pale moonlight, moving slow and deliberate, like it wanted me to know it was there. Mrs. Peterson hurried in from the kitchen, her eyes wide. "Maggie, is it him?" she whispered. "I don't know," I breathed, inching closer. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to part the curtain just enough to peek. And there he was, Thomas, standing in the middle of the yard. His head tilted up toward the window like he could see straight through the darkness into my soul. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't raging. He just stood there, smiling. That smile was worse than his fists. I ducked back, heart racing, clutching Emma so tightly she whimpered against me. Sarah, who had been dozing on the couch, jolted awake. "What's going on?" "It's him," I said, my voice cracking. "He's here." Sarah jumped to her feet, grabbed the baseball bat she had brought with her earlier, and marched toward the door. "I'll handle this." I caught her arm before she could unlock it. "No. That's what he wants. He wants us to come to him." Outside, Thomas took a step closer, then another, his boots crunching against the gravel. Slowly, patiently, like a wolf circling its prey. Then he stopped, and from his coat pocket, he pulled something shiny. My blood froze. It wasn't a weapon. It was worse. It was Emma's stuffed rabbit. The one she had lost 2 weeks ago in the park. My legs nearly gave out. That meant he had been following us. Watching us. Close enough to take something from my daughter's hands without me even realizing it. I slammed the curtain shut, panic surging through me. "He's been watching us all along," I whispered, my voice trembling. Sarah's grip on the bat tightened. "Then tonight we stop hiding. We end this." But before I could respond, a loud thud shook the front door. Then another. And another. Thomas was no longer smiling. He was trying to break in. I shoved Emma into Mrs. Peterson's arms. "Take her upstairs. Don't come out until I say." "But Maggie," Mrs. Peterson began. "Go," I barked, my voice sharper than it had ever been. She obeyed, rushing Emma away, while I turned back toward the door. My knees shook, but my grip on the skillet, my makeshift weapon, was solid. Sarah raised the bat beside me, fire in her eyes. "If he wants in," she said, "he's going to regret it." The banging grew louder, with splintering under the force. I whispered to myself, steadying my breath, "This ends tonight." And just as the door burst open with a deafening crack, the lights went out. The entire house was swallowed in darkness. The moment the lights went out, the house fell into complete darkness. My heart slammed against my ribs, and the sound of splintering wood still echoed in my ears. Thomas was inside. I couldn't see him. He couldn't see me. But I could feel him, the heavy, slow steps pressing into the floorboards, moving toward us like a predator savoring the hunt. "Stay low," Sarah hissed beside me, gripping the bat tightly. Her silhouette was barely visible against the faint glow of the moon seeping through the cracked door. I clutched the skillet, my palms slick with sweat straining my ears. Each step Thomas took sounded louder, heavier, closer. And then, "Maggie!" His voice tore through the silence, raw and furious. "I told you there's no leaving me. You and that brat are mine." His voice ricocheted off the walls, making it impossible to tell where he was. My chest tightened. Emma. Stairs. She was probably trembling in Mrs. Peterson's arms. I had to keep him away from her. Sarah shifted, lifting the bat, her breathing sharp and steady. "Talk to him," she whispered. "Keep him busy. I'll strike when he gets close." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice not to break. "You'll never touch her, Thomas. Not ever again. You're finished." He laughed, a sound that made my blood run cold. "Finished? Maggie, I own you. 10 years and you still don't get it. You can't run. You can't hide. You belong to me." His words slithered through the darkness, but something in me snapped. For 10 years I had believed him. For 10 years I had let his voice cage me. Not anymore. "I don't belong to you," I said, my voice steady now. "I never did." There was silence. Then a sudden rush of movement, his boots pounding against the floor as he charged. "Now!" I screamed. Sarah swung the bat. It connected with a sickening crack, and Thomas roared in pain. But he didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed the bat and yanked it out of her hands, throwing it across the room. I swung the skillet with all my strength. It slammed into his shoulder, and he staggered back, cursing. The darkness turned into chaos, grunts, shouts, the sound of furniture crashing. My arms burned. My knees shook. But I refused to stop. Then suddenly, his hand clamped around my throat. I gasped, clawing at his grip as he lifted me, his face inches from mine. Even in the dark, I could see the madness in his eyes. "You think you can beat me, Maggie?" he snarled, squeezing tighter. "You think you can take my life away after everything I gave you?" Stars danced in my vision. My lungs screamed for air. My skillet slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. But just as my strength began to fade, a piercing scream cut through the darkness. "Let go of my mommy, Emma." And before I could even turn, I heard the sound of something heavy slamming into Thomas's back. He released me with a roar, stumbling forward. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, and through the faint light, I saw her. Emma, my little girl, standing at the top of the stairs, holding the fallen baseball bat in both hands, her tiny face twisted with more courage than I'd ever seen. Thomas staggered, turning his gaze toward her, his rage boiling. "You," he growled, starting up the stairs. My heart lurched. "No," I screamed, scrambling to my feet. But before I could reach him, Emma raised the bat again, her small arms trembling, and swung with everything she had. The bat cracked against Thomas's skull. He collapsed, crashing down the stairs with a thunderous thud. The house went silent. So silent, I could hear Emma's ragged breathing from the top step. I rushed to her, scooping her into my arms, sobbing into her hair. My brave girl, my brave, brave girl. But just as relief started to wash over me, Thomas groaned. He wasn't dead. He was moving. The sound of his groan froze me in place. I clutched Emma tighter, my chest heaving, eyes locked on the heap of a man sprawled at the bottom of the stairs. Thomas stirred, his hand twitching against the floorboards. his chest rising with shallow breaths. Blood trickled down the side of his face where Emma had struck him, but the look in his eyes as they fluttered open was more terrifying than ever. Wild, burning, and filled with rage. Sarah scrambled across the room, her face pale, her hands shaking as she grabbed the skillet I had dropped. "Maggie, he's not done," she whispered, her voice trembling. I swallowed hard, pushing Emma gently behind me. "Stay back, baby. Don't move no matter what." Thomas groaned again, pushing himself onto his knees. "You." His voice was hoarse-broken. He lifted his head, and his bloodied grin sent a chill down my spine. "You think you can take me down? You think a child can stop me?" He planted one hand on the wall, dragging himself up inch by inch. The house was dead silent except for his ragged breathing and the creak of the floorboards under his weight. My mind raced. He was hurt, but he was still strong, too strong. If I didn't finish this tonight, he would never stop. Sarah's eyes darted to me, panic and determination colliding in her expression. "Maggie, this is it. Either he ends us, or we end him." The weight of her words pressed down on me. For 10 years I had dreamed of freedom, but I had always been too afraid, too broken to grasp it. Tonight I couldn't afford fear. Not with Emma watching. I tightened my grip on the bat Emma had dropped at my feet. My arms trembled, but my heart burned with a fire I hadn't felt in years. Thomas staggered closer step by step, his boots dragging across the floor. "You're mine, Maggie," he rasped, his voice cracking with fury. "You'll always be mine." Something inside me snapped. "No," I whispered, raising the bat high. My voice rose with every word. "I don't belong to you. I never did. Tonight it ends." He lunged at me with a guttural roar, arms outstretched like claws. I swung. The bat connected with his ribs. He howled, stumbling sideways, but still didn't fall. He charged again, knocking the bat from my hands, and grabbed my arm so hard I thought the bone might snap. I screamed, struggling against his iron grip. "Mommy!" Emma's voice shrieked from behind me. Thomas turned his head toward her, his lips curling into a sick smile. "Your little brat is next." Before he could finish, Sarah came flying from the side, slamming the skillet across his head with every ounce of strength she had left. The impact rang through the house. Thomas let out a strangled cry, his grip on me finally breaking as he collapsed to the floor, motionless this time. We stood frozen, staring at his still body, the silence pressing down on us like a heavy blanket. My chest heaved. My hands shook. Emma sobbed quietly against my back. And then, a faint sound. Not a groan. Not a breath. But the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Headlights swept across the living room wall, bright and blinding. Sarah's eyes widened. "Oh no. Maggie. What if it's him again? What if he didn't come alone?" My stomach dropped as the sound of car doors opening echoed through the night. Someone was here, and we had no idea if they were friend or foe. The glow of headlights stretched across the room like a blade of light, cutting through the thick darkness. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would give us away. Thomas lay on the floor, his chest barely moving. His blood smeared across the floorboards, but I couldn't take my eyes off the window. Someone had pulled into our driveway, and I didn't know whether to hope or to pray. Emma clutched my hand, whispering in a trembling voice, "Mommy, who is it?" "I don't know, baby," I murmured, pressing her behind me. "Stay quiet. Don't move." Outside, the sound of car doors slamming shut echoed in the night. 2 doors. Maybe 3. Then, heavy footsteps crunched against the gravel. Sarah gripped the skillet tighter, her eyes wide. "Maggie," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What if he brought people with him? What if this was his plan all along?" Her words clawed at my chest. My knees threatened to give way. 10 years of silence, 10 years of fear. And tonight, it felt like everything was crashing down at once. The front porch creaked. A shadow passed the window. Then, a fist pounded on the door. "Maggie," a deep voice boomed. "Open up. This is the police." I froze. Police? My breath caught in my throat. For a split second, hope flickered inside me. Could it really be over? Could someone finally be here to help? But then I hesitated. Thomas had friends in law enforcement. He had always bragged about it. What if it's not real police? What if this is another trap? Sarah's hand shook on my arm. Don't open it. Not yet. The pounding grew louder, more urgent. Maggie Walker, we know you're inside. This is your final warning. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Mommy, I'm scared. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to steady. It's okay, baby. I'm right here. The door rattled, as if someone was testing the lock. My body trembled. If it was real police, this might be our only chance. But if it wasn't? I took a shaky step toward the window, peeking through the cracked curtain. What I saw made my blood run cold. 3 men stood outside. They wore uniforms, yes. But their badges gleamed wrong in the light, too shiny, almost like toys. Their belts held no radios, no proper gear. And one of them was smiling. Not the smile of a savior. The smile of a hunter. I stumbled back from the window, my hand over my mouth to stop the scream threatening to escape. They're not real police, I whispered, my voice shaking. They're here for him. Sarah's face went pale. Oh my God. The fake officers began ramming the door, their boots slamming into the wood. The frame groaned and splintered with every blow. Emma cried out, covering her ears. My heart raced, my mind spiraling. Thomas was barely conscious on the floor. These men had come for him, or worse, for us. We had seconds. Only seconds. Upstairs. I hissed to Sarah. Take Emma. Go now. The door cracked under another blow. Splinters flew across the floor. Sarah grabbed Emma, rushing for the stairs. I stayed behind, my hands scrambling for the bat. My breath came fast and shallow. The door was about to give way. And when it did, we would be face to face with men far more dangerous than Thomas could ever be. The final slam against the door split the frame in two. The wood cracked, the lock gave way, and the door burst open with a thunderous crash. I froze where I stood, clutching the bat so tight my knuckles went white. 3 men stormed in, their boots pounding against the floorboards. The one in front, a tall, broad man with a shaved head, grinned when his eyes landed on me. His badge dangled loosely from his chest, glinting under the dim light. Nothing more than a cheap piece of metal. Well, well, he sneered, his voice low and taunting. Looks like she didn't run after all. The second man, shorter but stockier, glanced at Thomas's body on the floor. He let out a sharp laugh. He's down. I told you the idiot would get himself knocked out. The third man stepped in, closing the shattered door behind them. His eyes locked on me. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just stared, like a predator measuring his prey. My chest rose and fell in quick bursts. I lifted the bat higher, my arms trembling, my body ready to shatter at any second. Stay back, I warned, though my voice wavered. The tall one chuckled, taking a slow step forward. Oh, sweetheart, you've got it all wrong. We're not here for you. He pointed at the crumpled figure of Thomas, blood still dripping down his face. We're here for him. Our boss doesn't like unpaid debts. Thomas groaned, shifting weakly on the floor. His voice was barely audible. And no, not you, not now. The short man kicked him in the side, laughing as Thomas coughed out blood. Pathetic. He thought he could cheat us. Thought he could hide behind his wife. Guess she's tougher than him. The tall man's grin widened as he turned his gaze back to me. But here's the problem. You've seen us. And our boss? He doesn't like witnesses. My blood ran cold. Upstairs I heard the faint creak of a floorboard. Emma. Sarah. They were hiding, but if these men searched the house. I tightened my grip on the bat, forcing my voice not to break. You're not touching my daughter. Or my friend. You'll have to go through me first. The silent one finally spoke, his voice calm, almost chilling. That can be arranged. He lunged. I swung the bat with all my strength. The crack of wood against his arm echoed in the room, but he barely flinched. He grabbed the bat mid-swing, yanked it from my hands, and tossed it across the room like it was nothing. Panic surged through me as his cold eyes bore into mine. The tall one laughed, clapping his hands slowly. Fiery. I like her spirit. He leaned close enough for me to smell the sour whiskey on his breath. Maybe the boss will want her too. I shoved him back, my heart pounding, adrenaline burning through my veins. Don't you dare touch me. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded from upstairs. Emma had screamed. The men's heads whipped toward the ceiling. My stomach dropped. They knew. They knew we weren't alone. The tall man grinned wickedly. Looks like there's more fun in this house than we thought. And before I could stop him, he started up the stairs. No. I screamed, my voice tearing through the night as the tall man took the first step up the staircase. My legs moved before my mind caught up. I lunged forward, grabbing his arm with everything I had, yanking him back. He spun around, fury flashing across his face, and his massive hand clamped around my throat. I choked, my feet kicking against the floor as he lifted me halfway off the ground. His grip was like steel, cutting off my breath. Should have stayed quiet, he snarled, his face inches from mine. Sarah's voice rang out from upstairs, trembling but strong. Don't touch her. I couldn't see her, but I knew she was standing at the top of the stairs, shielding Emma behind her. My baby's cries echoed down the hallway, piercing, desperate. The tall man shoved me hard, sending me crashing against the wall. My shoulder exploded with pain, and I slid down, gasping for air. The stocky one laughed as he started up the steps after his partner. 2-for-1 deal tonight. The boss is gonna love this. Emma screamed louder. Mommy, that scream lit a fire inside me. I couldn't let them reach her. I wouldn't. Through blurry eyes, I spotted the bat lying a few feet away. Summoning every ounce of strength, I crawled across the floor, my body shaking. The silent one, his expression still unreadable, watched me, but he didn't move. Almost like he was waiting to see what I would do. My fingers wrapped around the bat's handle. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to my feet despite the pain screaming in my body. Get away from them. I roared. The stocky one turned just as I swung. The bat cracked against his back with a sickening thud, and he stumbled forward, crashing into the railing. Sarah grabbed a lamp from the hallway upstairs and hurled it down. It shattered against the tall man's head, making him stagger and curse. For a moment, just a moment, we had the upper hand. But then, the silent one finally moved. In a blur, he snatched the bat from my hands again, this time twisting my wrist until I screamed. He shoved me against the wall, pinning me there with one arm. His face was inches from mine, calm, cold, and terrifying. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he whispered. Hand over the child, and maybe we'll let you live. My chest heaved. My voice broke, but I forced the words out. You'll never touch my daughter. Upstairs, Sarah shouted. Maggie, they're coming in. The tall man had recovered and was storming up the stairs again. The stocky one, though hurt, was dragging himself up after him. And I was trapped in the silent man's grip, powerless to stop them as they closed in on Emma. Then from the floor beside us, a groan. Thomas. His bloodied face turned toward the men, and with a strength I didn't think he had left, he rasped, Leave them. Alone. Before I could process what was happening, Thomas grabbed the broken shard of the shattered lamp and drove it into the stocky man's leg. The man screamed, collapsing onto the stairs. Chaos erupted again. The stocky man howled, clutching his bleeding leg, his face twisted in rage and pain. He tumbled down a few steps, cursing as blood smeared across the wooden stairs. The tall man spun around, eyes wide with fury. You idiot. You let him. Before he could finish, Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs again, this time holding a heavy flower vase. With a scream, she hurled it straight down. It smashed against his shoulder, making him lose balance for a second. Emma's terrified cries filled the house, and that sound cut through me like a knife. My baby needed me, and I wasn't going to let these monsters near her. Not while I still had breath in my body. The silent one still had me pinned against the wall, his icy eyes never leaving mine. He hadn't flinched, not once, during all the chaos. But when Thomas struck again, slamming the lamp shard into the stocky man's arm, his head tilted slightly, almost as if he were interested. I struggled, clawing at his arm. Let me go. He leaned closer, his voice steady, calm, terrifying. You're wasting your strength. You should be bargaining for your life. Bargaining. I spat, rage boiling through my fear. The only thing I'm bargaining for is theirs. I jerked my head toward the stairs where Sarah was shielding Emma. For the first time, the silent man's eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. But it vanished as quickly as it came. Suddenly, Thomas staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his mouth, his body swaying. He looked like death itself, but his eyes burned with something I hadn't seen in years, defiance. "Touch my wife or my daughter," he croaked, pointing the bloodied shard toward them. "And I swear, I'll drag you all to hell with me." The tall man barked out a laugh. "You? Look at you, you're half dead already." He lunged forward to finish Thomas off. But Thomas didn't back away. He charged. The sight shocked me to my core. My broken, violent husband, who had made my life hell for a decade, was now throwing himself at the men who had come to destroy us. The two bodies collided with a sickening thud. The tall man slammed Thomas into the wall, but Thomas didn't stop. He stabbed the shard again and again, blood spraying as the tall man roared in pain. "Maggie, run!" Thomas shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. The silent one's grip on me loosened slightly as he turned his head toward the fight. In that split second, I shoved him with all my strength, slipping free. My chest heaved, my lungs burning, but I didn't care. I sprinted toward the stairs. Sarah reached out for me, her face pale with fear. "Maggie, hurry." I grabbed her hand, pulled Emma into my arms, and turned back just long enough to see Thomas locked in a brutal struggle with the tall man. Blood poured from both of them, their grunts and cries filling the room. And then, the silent one drew a knife. The glint of the blade under the dim light froze me in place. He moved silently, swiftly, stalking toward Thomas like a shadow. "No!" I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the chaos. He raised the knife high, aiming straight for Thomas's back. The blade flashed in the dim light, and my heart stopped. "Thomas!" I screamed, my voice raw, but it was too late. The silent man's knife plunged downward. Thomas twisted at the very last second. Instead of piercing his back, the knife slashed across his shoulder, deep enough to send blood pouring down his arm. He roared in agony but didn't collapse. He spun around, wild-eyed, grabbing the silent man's wrist with both hands. The two struggled, their bodies colliding against the wall, the knife wavering between them. The tall man, wounded but still vicious, staggered back into the fight, blood dripping from his side where Thomas had stabbed him earlier. Now it was 2 against 1, and my husband was losing ground fast. I clutched Emma tighter against my chest, my whole body shaking. Sarah's hand was on my arm, tugging. "Maggie, we have to go. If we stay, they'll kill us too." But I couldn't move. Not yet. Not while Thomas was still fighting for us. Thomas's face turned toward me for a fraction of a second. His eyes, bloodshot, desperate, but fierce, locked on mine. "Take her," he rasped, his voice breaking. "Take Emma and run." The silent man shoved the knife closer to Thomas's chest. Inch by inch, the blade pressed down, its point grazing his skin. "No," I cried, tears burning my eyes. "I can't leave you. You have to." His roar shook through me like thunder. Then suddenly, the stocky man, still bleeding from his leg wound, staggered up the stairs. His face twisted with rage as he pointed straight at Sarah and Emma. "Forget him," he snarled to the others. "The boss only cares about the girl." And he lunged. I screamed, clutching Emma tighter, backing away toward Sarah's room. But he was fast, too fast. His hand shot out, grabbing Emma's little arm. She shrieked in terror, kicking and thrashing. "Let her go," I screamed, yanking her back with all my strength. The stocky man sneered, his blood dripping onto the floor as he pulled harder. For one horrifying second, it felt like Emma would be ripped right out of my arms. Then a deafening crack split the air. The stocky man froze, his eyes wide with shock. Slowly, he turned his head toward the doorway. There stood our neighbor, Mrs. Green, the sweet old woman from next door, holding a shotgun. Smoke curled from the barrel. "You boys picked the wrong house," she said, her voice trembling but steady. The stocky man collapsed to the floor, blood spreading fast. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by Emma's sobs. But it wasn't over. Because the silent man still had the knife, and his eyes were now locked, not on Thomas but on me. The silence was suffocating. The stocky man's body lay crumpled on the floor, blood pooling around him. "Mrs. Green's hands trembled as she tried to steady the shotgun. But her old eyes widened as the silent man turned slowly toward her, then toward me. His face was still calm, eerily calm. His eyes never blinked. He moved like a predator, each step measured, each breath controlled. The knife glinted in his hand, dripping with Thomas's blood. "Give me the child," he said softly. Emma whimpered in my arms, burying her face against my chest. My knees shook, but I tightened my grip around her. "Over my dead body." He tilted his head, almost as if he admired my defiance. "That can be arranged." Before he could strike, Mrs. Green lifted the shotgun higher. "You stay right there, mister, or I'll." The silent man moved like lightning. He kicked the gun with brutal precision, sending it clattering across the floor. Mrs. Green gasped as he shoved her against the wall with terrifying force. Her frail body hit the plaster hard, and she crumpled, moaning weakly. "No." I screamed, my chest tearing apart. Sarah darted forward, grabbing the shotgun and fumbling with it. But the silent man was faster. He seized her wrist and twisted it until she cried out, the weapon slipping from her grasp. Emma's cries grew louder, piercing, echoing in the house like an alarm of doom. Thomas, barely standing, staggered forward, his bloodied shoulder shaking violently. "Leave them alone," he growled. The silent man shoved Sarah aside, stepped over the shotgun, and advanced on me. I backed up, my spine pressing against the wall. My breaths came fast, shallow, desperate. He raised the knife, slow, deliberate, savoring my terror. His eyes locked on Emma, not me. Time slowed. Thomas roared, throwing himself forward. He slammed into the silent man with all the strength left in his broken body. The knife clattered to the floor, sliding across the room. Both men crashed down, their fists flying, their grunts mixing with the sound of furniture toppling over. "Sarah!" I shouted, kicking the knife toward her. "Grab it!" She scooped it up, her hands shaking. But before she could act, the silent man threw Thomas across the room like a rag doll. He landed hard, coughing blood, his body twitching. The silent man rose slowly, a dark shadow towering over us. His chest rose and fell steadily, like he hadn't even broken a sweat. He turned toward Sarah, who was clutching the knife like her life depended on it. "Little girl," he said coldly, "you don't have it in you." Sarah's lip trembled. Her hands shook violently. But she didn't drop the knife. She raised it higher, her eyes locked on his. The silent man smirked. He stepped closer. And then Sarah screamed and lunged. Sarah's scream ripped through the house as she hurled herself forward, the knife raised high above her head. The silent man didn't flinch. He turned his body just enough that Sarah's strike slashed across his side instead of his chest. Blood sprayed, and he staggered back a step, but his hand shot out like a snake, grabbing her by the throat. "No!" I shrieked, surging forward, clutching Emma tighter. Sarah's legs kicked wildly as the silent man lifted her off the ground, his grip tightening on her neck. Her face turned red, then purple. The knife slipped from her hand, clattering uselessly to the floor. He leaned close to her ear and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he flung her across the room like she weighed nothing. She slammed into the wall and crumpled, gasping and coughing. "Sarah!" I cried, but I couldn't reach her, because he was already coming for me. His eyes were colder than death itself, and this time I knew there would be no hesitation, no delay. Thomas tried to rise again. His body shook as he staggered onto his knees, blood dripping from his mouth. He stretched out a trembling hand toward me. "Maggie, run!" But I couldn't run. My back was against the wall. Emma clung to me, screaming, her tiny hands digging into my shirt. The silent man raised his blood-soaked hand, fingers curling into a fist. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the blow. Then, bang! The shotgun roared again. My eyes flew open. The silent man jerked violently, a spray of blood bursting from his chest. His cold eyes widened in shock as he turned slowly. And there was Mrs. Green. Her face was pale, her body trembling, but she was standing. Somehow, the old woman had dragged herself up, the shotgun braced against her shoulder. Smoke curled from the barrel. "You won't hurt my neighbors," she said, her voice breaking but steady. The silent man staggered, dropped to one knee, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Not rage, not coldness, but disbelief. He tried to rise again. He even reached for the knife. But Mrs. Green pumped the shotgun once more and fired. The second shot tore through him, and this time he collapsed. His body hit the floor with a sickening thud, and he didn't move again. The house fell into a silence so thick, it rang in my ears. I clutched Emma, sobbing into her hair. Sarah crawled across the floor, her throat bruised but alive. Thomas slumped against the wall, his face ghostly pale, blood seeping into his shirt. And Mrs. Green, sweet, fragile Mrs. Green, stood over the body of the silent man, her hands shaking, her chest heaving. But just when I thought it was over, when I thought we had finally survived, Thomas's body gave a violent shudder. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed to the floor, completely still. "Thomas!" I screamed. "Thomas!" His name tore from my throat like a wounded cry. I dropped to my knees beside him, clutching Emma tight while Sarah scrambled to his side. His chest wasn't rising. His face was pale, lips turning blue. "No, no, no," I whispered, pressing my hand against his chest. "Don't you dare leave us, Thomas. Not like this." Sarah was sobbing. "He can't be gone. He can't." Mrs. Green staggered closer, the shotgun slipping from her trembling hands. I'll call for help," she croaked, fumbling for her old rotary phone. I pressed down on Thomas's chest, counting out compressions through my tears. "Stay with me. Stay with us. We survived all this, Thomas. You can't give up now." Emma's cries rang out like bells, raw and heartbreaking, as if she too was begging him to wake up. And then suddenly he coughed. His whole body jerked, and a raspy breath escaped his lips. My hands froze, and tears poured down my cheeks. "Oh, thank God. Thomas, stay with me. Just breathe." Sarah let out a sobbing laugh, clutching his hand tightly. "You scared us half to death." Mrs. Green, still pale but holding herself steady, nodded. "The ambulance is on its way. Hold on, boy. Just hold on." I pressed my forehead against his, whispering, "We're free now. Do you hear me? We're free." And for the first time in 10 long years, I felt the truth of those words. The weight I had carried, the silence, the fear, the chains of abuse, was gone. The monsters who had tried to break me, who had nearly stolen everything I loved, were no more. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, my freedom. It hadn't come easy. It had come with blood, with tears, with scars we would carry forever. But it was ours, and no one could take it from us again. As the sound of sirens grew in the distance, Sarah squeezed my hand. "We'll be okay now, Mama." I looked at her, at Emma, at Thomas, at Mrs. Green, and I believed it. The battle was over. But the lesson was forever clear. Silence is not strength. Suffering in silence only feeds the abuser. Speaking up, fighting back, reaching for freedom. It may cost you everything, but it is the only way to truly live. So, my dear viewers, if you've stayed with me through this journey, let me say this. Don't ever let fear trap you in silence. You are stronger than you think. You deserve freedom. You deserve peace. And now, before I close, let me remind you again. My name is Margaret Carter, I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I'm 68 years old. If you've been touched by my story, please subscribe, like, and click the notification button so you don't miss more powerful stories like this one. And let me know in the comments, from which part of the country are you watching? I love to hear from you all. This has been my story. Bride with Veil, Broken Heart. After 10 years of silent suffering, I finally reclaimed my freedom. Thank you for walking with me through it.